I began my day by ceasing to slumber. Shortly after that, Mom invited me to join her for an expedition to the Little Bird Cafe, which is apparently no longer in Old Town, but has instead moved into the old Fazoli's building, which I'd been to once before, when it was still Fazoli's. But man, did they give that place an overhaul. Before it was all dark and lit by candlelighty, but now it's like very open and light. Honestly, pretty cool vibe. Here's a picture. So yeah, Mom sponsored me the meal, and we ate good muffins and quiche. Man, that quiche is exceptional. Gotta be the best quiche I've ever eaten. We also just talked for a while. At this point, I was under the impression that Mom was an ISFP, hence, I was trying to pick her brain regarding how to be a FI god. And honestly, her emotional management techniques were stuff I mostly knew. But nevertheless, they did yield some surprising and informative insights. Overall, it was just very nice and relaxing to spend the morning that way. Very enjoyable. Here's a picture of Mom just being happy. Beep. Once I got back, I did philosophy and continued to do so until I got a message from Sydney notifying me that Neo's grandma was dying and he was scheduled to drive out with his brothers to see if he could make it before she passed. And hence, until leave time, she figured he would appreciate me being around for emotional support. So I ceased doing philosophy and instead traveled over to the Balance House and mostly played Dutch Blitz with Alan and Sydney. And I think that was slightly comforting for Neo. I don't know if it really was, but eventually he joined us in for a few games before his brothers arrived. And then, with some not so minor delays, Neo was off. And after bestowing a hug upon him, I hesitantly returned to my abode and once again studied philosophy. After that, I watched Attack on Titan with Mom. Later that night, I called Katie Smith, and she instructed me in the ways of FI mastering. While it took a bit of digging, she actually had some really insightful things to say, and I think her thoughts and techniques are definitely going to come in handy for the future. I took notes. However, ironically, the biggest thing to come out of that conversation was me discovering the emotion wheel. Look at that bad boy. Isn't it super useful? Turns out, I don't need FI users to make me a Pokedex of emotions because lol, science already did it for them. But yeah, I don't know why I didn't look that up before. But I talked with Katie, and as I was talking, I was like, I remember reading one of my psychology books, there's some sort of emotion disorder developed by a dead white guy. And so I perused the internet, and I found this beautiful tool. So yeah, it was absolutely essential to the defeat of Q, but more on that later. Anyway, the point is, Katie became my FI sensei for 2 hours, and then retired once she had nothing left to teach me. But those 2 hours were full of great wisdom. Sensei, I will never forget the lessons you taught me. Probably. From there, I decided, based on our conversation, to try and engineer an emotion capturing moment wherein I purchased strawberry mochi, see, not green tea mochi, and also found a good song, and then ate said mochi and listened to said song while cracking a letter in hope that later on, when I tasted said strawberry mochi and listened to said song, it would invoke the same emotions I experienced while reading the letter. I have no idea if it worked, but I'll let you know if my experiment was successful when the time comes. And then, from there, I did some little things before going to sleep. That night, I got real bad sleep. I only got 3 hours. Ended up going on a walk in the middle of the night to try and reset, and honestly, it worked pretty well. Though the walk was big cold. From there, I went to church, which was average. I joined Joe, Karina, Johanna, and Benj, Sam, and not Noah, because he had to go, but was still very much at Southgate by the time we got back, on a Walmart run, in which I don't really know what was purchased or why, but it was still mildly fun. Once I got in with that, I went home shortly thereafter and did a bit of philosophy before I was requested by Mom to set up this motion sensor light and help her fix a drawer. So I did those things, and I got the light set up with ease, but I did not succeed at fixing her drawer. I made the process so much harder than it needed to be, not going to lie. Hardcore engineering fail. But, the next day I got it done, so. Braden then showed up, and we went on a walk, which was good. We worked out this exchange wherein I would watch some of the show he really liked and impacted him, and he would read Unbroken, the book that Cheyenne sent me, which I honestly thought was pretty impactful. Of course, that is all quite trivial compared to the fact that it was discovered by Braden. That it was discovered that Braden is probably an ISFP, which is actually blowing my mind. I thought he was an INTJ/ISTJ for ages, because that's why I typed him back way back in the day, before my renewal of MBTI, and I just never questioned it. But now that he mentions it, him being an ISFP does make a good amount of sense. So yeah, that was a pretty big shocker, at least for me. Then, after Braden left, I drove over to the Balance House, and Sydney joined me in the Phoenix for approximately a 3-hour-long Gungor listening session. See, apparently, Gungor put out this Soul, Spirit, Body album, where all the songs work together to tell a story if you listen to them in order. And it's like her Violet Evergarden in terms of impact. Hence, she wanted to show it to me, and she wanted to show it to me for a while, and now the time had come. So we hopped in the car, and I started driving. I didn't really have a plan or a destination, and we just listened in silence for basically the whole time. However, after about 45 minutes or so, I realized this would be a good time to try and take down Q, because it had reared its ugly head again. And while I wasn't particularly enthusiastic about the prospect of examining my inner emotional life, I was kind of like, well, I'm stuck here for the next 2 hours, and it's a pretty ideal environment. So, because I, got the emotionally evocative music going on the whole time, I might as well. Hence, I undertook, once again, to best Q in battle. And this time it worked. I would like to credit my FI sensei Katie for the victory, but in truth, she did not come into play much in the end. Sorry, Katie. But your advice was well appreciated, though. Nevertheless, I finally figured out what the core of Q was, and it only took 2 hours of painfully tedious introspection and exhausting feels. And what's worse, I might add, is that feelings emotions is just so exhausting. Like, despite the nature of the work, which I detest, I pushed through though, and I finished, and I reached the other side, and it was glorious. Also, despite the fact I planned nothing, we arrived back to Cindy's house 3 minutes from when the playlist reached its natural conclusion. So I had accidentally fantastic timing, as well as being an emotional introspection boss. So double win. I deserve all your praise and adoration. So yeah, that was really good. Also from there, a few songs to listen to on the drive. I really liked but most of them I found just kind of mystically weird. Didn't really grab me. So yeah, end verdict regarding Gun Gore Super Playlist is not really my jam, but nevertheless, glad I listened to it, and the drive was overall a total win. Once I got home, as one might expect, I was one might expect with someone with an inferior feeling function, I was emotionally exhausted. So Mom and I rounded out the night by watching Attack on Titan. After that, I watched a bit more anime before going to sleep. The next morning, I did something that I think was mega-brained. See, in the car ride, I had figured out the essential components that made up Q, and while the diagnosis was very useful, all the emotional components were jumbled together, and I couldn't discern what judgments were listening to what emotions. Hence, as soon as I woke up, I deliberately stopped myself from thinking about anything until I got through my morning routine, showering and such. And then, the first thing I did is I sat down and allowed myself to think. And see, as each thought or judgment came to mind and elicited emotion, I was able to stop myself from further thinking and just dissect that particular emotion and judgment until it was fully explored, and then move on to the next. It is in this manner that I proceeded for the next 2 hours or so until I finally made it through and vanquished all of Q. Actually so much work, but still well worth it because, I feel great. So yeah, that is the tale of how I bested my inferior function and rose again to attain greater heights of personal growth than I personally thought possible. And with the help of an FI sensei, a touch of divine aid, and a whole lot of grit and determination. You actually don't understand how accomplished I felt. Like sitting down and figuring out whether subjunctive facts require us to be realists about possible worlds of erraticism, easy. I can do that all day. But sitting down and figuring out my emotions? Yeah, no thank you. Actually so hard to do and mega gross. Hence, accomplishing this particular task was Herculean as far as acts of true mastery go. Anyway, all that to say, I did hard things, felt great, and then watched some anime. After that, I did some philosophy before Mom took me out for whiskey still for a burger, and holy cow, that burger was fantastic. Very, very good burger. If you haven't gone to the Whiskey Still, you must go. And see, it was during this time that I had another monumental moment, namely that I realized that Mom is actually an ISFJ. See, ages back before my MBTI revolution, I tagged a lot of my friends with my rudimentary MBTI knowledge. And Mom, way back when, garnered the label of ISFP. And it's not like that was an unbelievable assessment by any means. But see, my practice as it stands rarely includes reevaluating one's type once given, unless, behavioral facts call it into question. And hence, I had just, rolled with that assessment all this time. But as Mom and I were talking, and, I was trying to give her some advice based off type, she kept saying things I was like, yeah, that's not how I would expect you to speak from an ISFP's perspective. Until eventually it dawned on me that Mom was very much not an ISFP. But the really interesting thing about the whole exchange was the fact that Mom, falsified the ISFP thesis by what she said. And see, I've always had this concern, because I think it's a good concern to entertain, that there's a bit of, a placebo effect in Jungian psychology. The concern is, we could type you as almost any type proximate to your own and explain away the inconsistencies or abnormalities with various combinations of cognitive functions and interactions. And I want to be clear that I think this genuinely does happen somewhat often. But the really cool thing about Mom's case is that given my knowledge of her type and her answers, I just straight couldn't reconcile the things she was saying with her assigned type. And while I had, absolutely no intent of even considering she might be a different type that I had previously labeled her, her behavior compelled me to that conclusion. Hence, what this means is that there's genuinely a significant portion of Jungian psychology that is straight recalcitrant to placebo effect and even and has predictive claims. And if understood adequately, genuinely does have a fixed and falsifiable nature. So, it was unfortunate to have been operating off the wrong type for Mom for this whole time, but it was nevertheless very cool to see the concrete evidence in a personal case of how Jungian psychology isn't a pseudoscience. So yeah, very exciting. After that conversation, we discovered Mom's actual type. I then watched a YouTube video on how diodes work before going to Monday night. It was at that point in time, as I was driving, that the awesomeness of my defeat of Q really hit me. Since, as soon as I defeated Q, I kind of just got swept up in things. I hadn't really had time to think about it. So I got super hyped and excited once I got to the Jameses. I grabbed Benj, Johanna, and Liam and just sang quite enthusiastically to music while driving mildly recklessly. It was absolutely great. I don't get hyped all that often, and man, it's a great feeling when I do. Once we got back, we ate mac and cheese, graciously prepared by Noah, Karina, and Joe, and then many tales of the great Varley were recounted. From there, we had a powwow as to what we wanted to do with D&D moving forward, and the conclusions we reached were good. After that, Noah initiated a night walk with tea, so we did that. Once we got back, I explained to everybody the really cool new model of personal growth I've been learning called Spiral Dynamics, based on the work of Claire Graves, who is in fact a dude, despite being named Claire, which actually messes with me so much. And it seemed like everyone was really enjoying it. Since then, I've been exploring the model further, and it's quite interesting. Very useful. And with that, we called it a night. I drove home and went to sleep. The following morning, I did funime before going on my oh-so-interesting classes. However, I did get to go home early. At least that was nice. Once I returned home, I did some philosophy, another round of funime, read some Magic Diamond, and then Ben came over, and simultaneously we got talking, and spontaneously we got talking, and that was good. I would say, I would have stayed talking, but it was requested by Sydney that I come be the smart person at Ratio because Neil was gone, and apparently it was a Q&A night. Hence, quite begrudgingly, I obliged and sat in on what was far from the worst Ratio Christie Q&A, but it's also not the best. See, the thing about Ratio Christie Q&As is, the idea is really cool, but the execution is usually so-so. Like, often it turns into a mini debate session with two people just going at it and the rest observing. And to be fair, that didn't happen until the end of this one, but nevertheless, it did happen. Still, in the meantime, I got to have a few, fun spiels where I was like, well, actually, pushes up his glasses. And I think people found what I had to say somewhat useful. But yeah, there were some points that were good. Most of it was pretty slow, but nevertheless, I attended, and my hope of attendance... Oh, and it's my hope that my attendance bettered the world in some trivial and forgettable way. Once that concluded, I went home, read more philosophy, discovered that the Boulder avocado salt and vinegar chips are way better than the normal Boulder salt and vinegar chips. A truly life-changing discovery. And hence I ate those and read philosophy, and it was great. The next morning began as the previous night ended. Philosophy. I then did funime, went on a very long walk to Walmart to go buy chamomile tea and get some exercise, and also learned about this new personal development system called spiral dynamics, which has turned out to be quite interesting. Not Jungian psychology level interesting, but, quite interesting. And I've been learning more about it using this, and it's been super useful. So yeah, did that, 2-hour or so long walk, learned all the things, and then as soon as I got back, I summoned a willing Noah and Jake to my house so I could ramble about it. Though before that, I actually went on a walk with Mom and gave her a brief rundown of the system, and she got me free coffee, which was very nice. But yeah, eventually I got explaining, and while Noah had already heard the basis of it, he stuck around for, part of the new info, but then he had to leave for class. But Jake, on the other hand, was quite diligent and a persistent student, and he stuck around for the full 3 hours or so that I explained the system and all of its, intricacies. And then we got to chat about its application. Honestly, a very fun conversation. I actually love it when I discover these new systems. It seriously, hypes me up. So yeah, that was great. I did funime with Mom, and then finally finished Attack on Titan. Oh my gosh, that show is so long. From there, I did a bit of philosophy, and then mostly read Nardi's book before deciding on a whim to open up one of my old journey notebooks, only to discover this lovely message, which reads as follows. Alex is a tasty piece of meat. Your toes are attractive. Pretty boy you are. Yep. There's a chance I might have shared this before, but whatever. The message is timeless. So yeah, the years when I was a lad. They were truly something. Anyway, most of the messages I reread, with a few exceptions, were heartfelt, and it was cool to relive those moments. Honestly, such a cool thing to have notebooks like those in your past. But yeah, after perusing those, I had a deep sense of nostalgia and satisfaction, and then I slept. The next day was Thursday before chemo and hence fasting, so I did all that. However, the thing that was different this time was CSU was hosting an engineering career fair, so I decided to check that out. I am still in this sort of nebulous period where I haven't quite done enough engineering to be desirable for internships. I'm effectively a sophomore, but I've also technically done enough engineering to maybe be desirable for internships. Hence I was like, we'll give it a shot. So I looked at all the people and that were hiring mechies beforehand, and then I made a list of them, and then I systematically talked to most of them. I gave myself 2 hours or so for the whole venture, but I still ran out of time. I then got to all the potential employers. I did get to all the potential employers I really wanted to talk to, though, so we'll see how it goes from here. After that, I had a bunch of different exams for my various classes, and I took 2 exams online while doing my during when my sociology class would have been. Went to music appreciation, and then once I got home, I took my global climate change exam. After that, I read a bit more of Nardi's Magic Diamond book, took Noah on a joyous car ride through the Riscane in my glorious Phoenix, in which we had deeper matters talked about, and then I endeavored in an attempt to find some video games to play for my next chemo session. See, my typical policy is to stay far away from video games, because deep in my past, there was a time where I was quite addicted. And of course, my TE, gets big sad when I waste time. So, video games equal big sad. Thus, with the simple equation established, it has long been my best interest not to play video games. But the chemo round before was mega nasty, and so my thought was, perhaps I can leverage my long-forgone addictive nature and utilize it to my advantage so as to survive the upcoming blight in a more efficacious way. Because of this, because last time I actually felt so bad, and that really wasn't helping by anime. Hence, in an attempt to actualize this strategy, I proceeded to purchase and then subsequently returned a number of Steam games, all of which my computer was too weak to run. Hence, in the end, nothing really happened. I didn't really buy any games, and basically, I was back to where I started. Thus, my time was wasted, and my TE was sad. But, to make my TE happy, I did apply some internship opportunities, so that wasn't a total waste. But yeah, that was a failure, and thus my day ended. The next day dawned, and I had a mounting sense of apprehension, as given my previous experience, it seemed all but certain I had passed the threshold. That the tales of horror which had once been... Okay, that the tales of horror, which had been told throughout the barren halls of hospitals since the time chemo began, would now be visited upon me by etheric fates, willing nothing but my evil and suffering. But thankfully, I was wrong. It wasn't that bad. I mean, it definitely wasn't great. I felt garbage, but it was way less bad than time before. It felt more like chemo round 4 or 5 than chemo round 8. So knowing it wasn't, always going to get continually worse was actually quite nice. Also, Joe's my chemo buddy this time around, and he did a swimming job. Excellent chemo buddy. I'm not going to say he tops the charts, but, certainly wasn't the bottom either. Solid mid-tier chemo performance. Once I got back, I watched anime for ages. I watched one anime where a dude who lives in the world with magic can't use magic, so he gets immensely buff, and instead basically just beats all the magic users by being buff. And it was pretty good. And then another one about a guy who is a cook, and he's got no useful combat skills when he got slurped in the world, but, he can just cook. By no means Violet Evergarden in a life-changing anime, but they were still mildly entertaining. I also watched Thor Love and Thunder, which I haven't seen until at this point in time, and it was bad. The only other thing I did that day was make a significant conversation with Ben, but it got cut short because I was, because it got late, and my chemo body was like, I am dead now, so I couldn't stay up. The next day, I felt mostly good, definitely good enough to go to church, and so I did that. At lunch, we had Peter, Evan, and what's-his-name jumped on the circle, and that was honestly great. Peter intrigues me. I might try to get to know him better. Once I got home, I finished the Magic the Diamond book, and which, again, garbagely written. Like, I'm sure there's useful information in there, but gross. Still, I made it through, 400 pages or so, and so I put the important stuff in the note stock, and eventually plan to coordinate it all and put it all in the paper. I've also been learning from Personality Hacker, so I'll put that in the paper too. Create, the ultimate Jungian psychology reference guide. But first, I gotta get everything I want out of Personality Hacker, and that's gonna take a bit, because they have 500 episodes. After completing what Mom was gracious enough to... completing that, Mom was gracious enough to make jalapeno popper peppers, which are big yum, and so I consumed those while watching Black Widow with her. And once again, I have to say, live-action movies just suck. Granted, not all animes are great, and I do have something of bias, but still, these Marvel movies are just straight boring. I'm not even entertained. And perhaps this is just, a recent Marvel movies, phenomena, and not a fact that's reflective of live-action in general. I don't know. But aside from that, whole Black Widow thing, the jalapeno poppers are really good. Not Sydney or Alan level good, mind you, but still, they outclass. But they're still very, very good. Because Sydney and Alan do outclass them. Thereafter, I went on a meandering walk, in which I listened to Percent Hacker. I got home, took a nap, and upon waking, did some MBTI research before finding some more anime to put on my list. Not going to lie, I'm really running out of anime. I mean, strictly speaking, that's false. There are many anime left for me to see. But anime that are clean are fewer and farther in between. Hence, trying to find some anime that meet my standards and that I haven't seen is becoming increasingly difficult. I was able to find one or two, but man, we're running low on options here. The next morning began with sweet philosophy. I then did some prep work for the upcoming D&D session, went on a Personality Hacker podcasting listening walk, and then I journeyed to the King Supers. I journeyed to the king who rules over all the supers to purchase from him chips, as has been our long-standing accord. Once I returned to my own humble domain, I had Funame, did more philosophy, picked up Neo early, and then drove to Joe's, wherein I stuck Neo in a corner and went on a walk with Joe and Karina and had the big discussions. One result of which is that I've been determined I shall do strain dances when the time arrives. I'm sorry, Jake. I know I have failed you. Then, once I got back, I taught Neo Spout Dynamics, but in a fun way where Joe first said everything he remembered, and then I filled in the extra details, which is actually a really good way of teaching, as it gives the other person a case to test their knowledge and teach. But then, also means I'm less ranty. From there, we had food, and I did a special D&D session where I split the party into groups and had them do puzzles, which I think was really well done. Some interesting songs were composed, but we don't talk about that. After that, Joe wanted to show us a reverse magic format he and Sam have been messing around with. The goal is to lose, and so we played a game of that, and it was decent. A bit of a clunky format, but it's novel, so, I appreciate that. And then, once that ended, I drove home, but on the way back, I decided to get gas, and oh my gosh, that was the longest gas station experience on Earth. This pump needs to retire, okay, because I kid you not, it took over 20 minutes to fill my tank, and I'm not even exaggerating. I tried canceling the transaction, but it actually wouldn't let me, so in the end, I just got stuck waiting for 20 minutes while the pump trickle-filled my tank, and it was death. Still, it made me stop and think about life, because lol, I had nothing better to do, and it also made me realize that I really stopped to think about life, particularly my distant future. I'm often, planning or daydreaming of my proximate future, but for some reason, I almost never think about my, distant future. Maybe it's because, it's so distant, it seems futile to try and control it. But regardless, I think that I should actually think about my distant future more often, because it does help orient the meta of one's life. So the gas station experience was not for naught, but it was still painful. The next morning, I slept in a bit, and got dressed up all fancy, because I had to go to this LCS ballroom thing. Oh, not LCS. Laurie Student Center, ballroom, to see the people I wanted to, if they wanted to interview me. So I did that, and they were like, we shall interview you at 8 in the morning tomorrow. And I was like, the world is cruel and unjust. And then we parted ways. From there I had classes, but no music appreciation. I got home, studied philosophy, did food made with Mom, stalled for a bit, and then went over to Ratio, where Alan and I whiteboard fought, as is our righteous tradition. Picture. Once I got home, I worked on this life deal, and then I went to sleep. The following morning, I woke up early for my interview, and that went really well, I think. I don't know. They haven't contacted me back yet, so I probably didn't make the cut. But, then, per mom's request, I visited her at work. So I made most of the time in the morning. Here is a picture of that. Boop. I got a so-so coffee out of the deal and then drove home sufficiently caffeinated. Once I got home, I read philosophy for 2, maybe 3 hours, and then I went out and bought car stuff because mom told me that mom wanted me to change her oil. And then I just sat on the front porch and waited. Once again, realizing the number of times I stopped doing things is really quite minimal. Besides that, though, the weather was quite nice, and I had green tea mochi to eat, so it was a good sort of waiting. Once mom arrived, I got to work changing her oil, and I'm just stupidly efficient at this point in time. I've done so many oil changes. Also, the mechanic said her pan was broken, but, it was fine. I had to take my impact gun to the nut to get it loose, but, nothing was actually wrong with it. So it shows you what mechanics know. I hate mechanics. After I got the oil change done, I then came in and worked some more on this life demo, and then from there, I drove over to Jake and Charity's house, where I was given free noodles in payment for my time, and we had a 4-hour Jungian psychology talk. I got to / had to talk to Charity about how FI works for both of us, because she's also a TE dominant. And I think I was able to get some good content across, but it still made me uncomfortable talking about the inner workings of having FI inferior. Having to admit some of those things out loud. But anyway, I think the two of them found it helpful, and Jake at least seemed to have some 50 moments, so that was good. Once I got home, I was tired because I woke up early that day for the interview, and so I just went to sleep. That Thursday, I had classes, but I left early, so not much going on of importance. I also failed yet another music appreciation exam and got a 65. Before, I was kind of joking about failing the music appreciation class, but now, it might actually happen. I'm probably just going to withdraw from the class late in the semester because, it's not like I actually need the credits. From there, I wanted to drive and listen to music. I bought food for my dog-sitting future, packed, and then went on a walk over to City Park where there was this really cool weather where the sun was fully shining, but it was snowing. Very unique. One of those, everyone just stops what they're doing and just stares kind of weather moments. You have to be there to understand it. Still, I technically got a picture. And if you look really hard, you could see the snow. Anyway. Very unique. Super cool. Well, when I started to head back home, I called Johanna, and that was a good chat, and we caught up some. And then once I got back, I drove over to Andrew and Haley's house for my dog sitting duties. They have a pretty nice house, not going to lie, but it's small nice, not big nice. Anyway, I decided beforehand I wouldn't be productive while house sitting because, I was on a rest craze, and hence I spent the evening watching Freeing, an anime I've been anticipating for quite some time, and, was waiting for it to be dubbed. The music is by the same guy that did Violet Evergarden's music, and it's really good. The other thing I did is the house has this overpassy thing, and the carpet's big soft, so I grabbed a blanket and laid up there, and the 2 dogs that didn't hate me laid on me, and it was honestly pretty great. There's a picture. It's not like I'm much of a dog lover, but in that moment, I could definitely see the appeal. I did that activity a number of times throughout the days. Very nice activity. The only thing that happened that night was I cracked William's letter, and it was great. Glorious letter from a glorious man. Turns out he also wrote me a poem. Way back, before the Ballad of Varley was ever conceived, he actually wrote me a ballad of my own. How great is that? What can I say? Great minds think alike. I genuinely can't believe we both instinctively did that for each other. Absolute crack up. Still, my ballad is better, just saying. The next morning, I had to get up early because of dogs, and it was at this point my duties became more challenging than first anticipated. See, I was dog sitting for 3 dogs, but one of the dogs, Fitz, was absolutely terrified of me. If I were actively trying to murder the beast, I think his response would have been appropriate. So, as a result, I let him out in the morning, and he would not come back in. Absolutely under no circumstances. He wouldn't eat either, which is bad because my duty is to feed him. Hence, there was quite the debacle trying to get him to come inside, consisting of both my own attempts, me calling the owner, and her trying to coax him through, and then even me, Benj, and Neo all trying to herd him in, which was an ordeal. Eventually, to bypass the timeline, he did actually come inside, but it was not until well after dark, and it was only after a very, very begrudging amount of work. My conclusion from the whole ordeal is that dogs are like babies. A whole lot of work for negligible reward. Regardless, he eventually did come inside, which I'm big grateful for, and he ate some food, and thus didn't die. But we did skip the timeline there, so let's skip back. After spending most of my day relaxing my life depended on it, I then became so bored I hit up Neo, and he came over, and we sat in the balcony thing and talked as the dogs rested upon us. Once again, I shall reiterate, a very enjoyable activity. After that, we played some Starvio, and then Bench came over and joined us, but he didn't like Starvio. So once we died, we decided to swap to Dipio, and it turns out that was a success. So we all played like garbage, but it was fun. After that, I took Neo home. Noah arrived. Then after some things and complications, Noah and Benj and I migrated downstairs, ate jalapeno popper peppers and pizza rolls in with them in tow, and began our movie. See, the OG plan was to watch the anime Erased because it's really well done. It's only 12 episodes, so we could finish it. But as it turns out, it was no longer on Netflix or Crunchyroll, at least dubbed. However, there was on Netflix a live-action remake of the anime, and so for lack of better options, and because it sounded kind of fun, we're like, whatever, let's do it. And so we full sent. And honestly, it was so much better than if we watched the actual anime. See, the live-action remake, for once, was actually really close to the anime, and it made it pretty good because the anime was pretty good. But it was still clearly low budget with some like majorly questionable acting at some points. So it also made it absolutely hilarious and perfectly mockable. Hence the movie ended up beautifully straddling the gap between good enough to not be painful and bad enough to be mockable. And it just made the whole experience super enjoyable. What's the moral of the story, you ask? Neckbeards. Science cannot explain them. One man cannot contain them. And the best of killers feign them. It was neckbeard inception, okay? My mind was blown so many times. And when the final neckbeard turned out to be fake, oh, that was a moment like no other. That show had me genuinely on the edge of my seat in anticipation. Just not for the reasons you would anticipate. Anyway, it was actually great. Probably one of my favorite movie watch experiences. Oh, and we also had deep fried Oreos and milk from Fat Shack. The milk was not from Fat Shack, the deep fried Oreos one. But yeah, that also made it very good. Thus, with our minds cast upon how we too could harness the power of the neckbeard, Benj and Noah departed the abode. At some point, Benj, Noah, and I are going to all make kilts, which, don't get me wrong, is very exciting. But if we grew neckbeards to harmonize with those kilts, I feel like we're like only scratching the surface of our true potential as men, Maybe we haven't been dreaming big enough. Finally, as for today, I woke up early to do dog things, had a nice slow morning, sat with the dogs on the balcony, and just thought all the thoughts. Then I got a text from Haley letting me know that they'd be coming back early, so I got cleaning and preparing. I listened to a Personality Hacker podcast that did so. I then finished that process around noon. One of the dogs got into food while I wasn't paying attention and ate his heart out, so that was great. But otherwise, I left the place without incident. Still, I really doubt I'm ever going to get that gig again. Not entirely sure I would like it, even if they offered. Once I got home, I realized how nice my corner it is. Like the anime posters, the nice lighting, the comfy chair. It's all so lovely. I then went on a walk with Mom down to Old Town because the weather was beautiful and we had a really good conversation. I'm realizing I really do enjoy Mom to a good capacity. She has a level of maturity I can really appreciate. And Effie, so it's like, what's there not to like? So yeah, good conversation. We got this electrolyte drink at the shop where Little Bird used to be and it was really good. We then picked up some Ace stuff from Ace Hardware on our way back. After that, I had Funime, still trying to finish the last little bit of Naruto, but it is such a slog. Then I worked on this email for quite a while. After I almost finished, since, I was waiting for Dad and Grace to come home, I proceeded to watch some Frieren. That show is super growing on me. It doesn't have, much action, but man, when the action hits, it's so good. Absolutely fantastic. And then they got back, and it was a super brief reunion in which the first thing Grace did was pencil in my eyebrows, because me not having them was apparently weirding her out. Yeah, my hair is largely thin, but it's not all the way gone. And then she headed off to go see Emerson, and I listened to Dad's End of the Tales before going to my room and finishing the last of my second metaphysics anthology. Oh yeah, look at this. Do you see those 2 books? Yeah, that's been the last 4 months of my life. Probably the average reading I've done is 3, maybe 4 hours a day. It's been absolute death. But I did it. The second metaphysics anthology has concluded, which means it's finally time for me to start drawing conclusions. I'm now thoroughly educated in the most advanced metaphysics scholarship has to offer, at least as far as I can tell. And it's finally time for me to get writing. I'm seriously considering trying to get these papers I'm about to create in some peer-reviewed journals, because I think it'd be really cool. And we'll see, if I actually go to the effort of it all, though. But yeah, with that monumental task completed, with a monumental task accomplished, I have caught up with the present and grasped it fully. Talk to you all next time.